Okay, we're recording now. So just to give you a quick recap of where we left off. Okay. Just have to admit, Rachel R. Okay. And we looked at the story of the golden calf. We read through chapter 32 in depth. If you weren't here last week, or if you didn't watch it, you might, after today, you might want to go watch it, just because there will be some sort of prior knowledge. But the basic gist of it is that Moshe Rabbeinu says nothing, and we looked very carefully. That extra vayomer was so key. Moshe Rabbeinu does nothing, and then all of a sudden he says to God, like, what are you getting mad about? He's like, what are you getting mad about? They just made a golden calf. I mean, that's the worst thing possible. And then we interpreted lama as lema, like he says to God, to what ends? Really what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing was he was what Rabbi Foreman again called the original filibuster. And he's just trying to stall so that he can get down there, straighten things out with the people, and then go back and ask forgiveness, which in fact he does. He asks forgiveness for them. Even though God said, Vayinachem Hashem, God changed his mind. He's not going to destroy them. But that means he's not going to wipe them out right now. It doesn't mean he's not going to punish them. It just means he's not going to wipe them out in a second and with Moshe and start over with you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. And here we go. Okay, you see my screen? Very good. Very good. Let me just make sure I see everybody else. And okay, now, Moshe starts his plea with this pasuk, the first pasuk here, source number 1. Vayichal Moshe es pnei Hashem Elokav vayomer lama Hashem yechareh apacha b'yamecha asher otzeisem eretz mitzrayim b'koach gadol v'yad chazaka. Now again, we are so familiar with this pasuk because this is what we lay in every fast day. With the exception of Yom Kippur. But on a regular fast day, when we lane, both in the morning and in the afternoon, we read this. We call it laying Vaychal. And it has to do, why it's a fast day. Okay, fine. But this is Moshe when he first says to God, like, what are you getting up? What are you angry about? This is the lama. But the key word here is Vaychal. Vaychal. So here it means, and Moshe, according to Safari, the word is implored. Anyone has another chumash? I don't know what it says. It probably says something like entreated, or if I look at Art Scroll. I mean, if Art Scroll is the definitive definition of life, right?
Mine says supplicated.
Supplicated. There you go. Okay, so if I ask you, my fellow grammarians, what is the shorish of the word vaychal?
One says pleaded also.
Oh, okay. Pleaded, supplicated. So, like, what does that mean? Hebrewly speaking. Okay.
I would think that the root is chet lamed, but that would mean to begin.
Okay.
So I'm confused by the translation.
Right. So somehow it means. Now, again, this is not an etymology course, but it is important to know that where words come from and why they mean what they mean, okay? Especially if we look at 2 other times when the word appears, even though it's a different word, but it's the same word because it's the same letters. We have a bar mitzvah next Shabbos. Nebuch from Nebuch and Nebuch, this kid who has to learn Vayikra, and Vayikra has so many words that look the same and are pronounced differently. There's one pasuk where it says Ashom, Asham, Asham. 3, the same letters in one pasuk, and each is pronounced differently. Mizevach, Mizbach, Mizbeach. It's unbelievable. Like, it's so confusing for a kid because there's no dots, there's no nekudos. So here we have a word in 2 times. First, it says in source number 2, Vayachel od shivas yamim acherim, Vayosef shalach es hayona min hateva. He waited another 7 days, and then he sent the dove from the ark. Who's the he there, by the way?
Noah.
Noach. And then again, it says Vayachel Noach ish ha'adama vayita kerem. Noach, the tiller of the soil, he's the man of the soil. It says Vayachal there means he
That's
was.
what we say.
He was what?
What does Vayachal mean here?
He began. So that we could already live with because like lehatchil, hatchala, or if you're from Brooklyn, it's a haskola. Kolas koshes. That if you have a beginning, tchila, that I understand, or for something to begin to take effect is for we say that kedushin is chal, like something goes into effect. The one is vayachel is waited. He waited 7 days, right? Why vayachel there? And here it's both terms is vayachel, exact same nekudos, totally different meaning. One means to begin, and one means that he waited. I don't know where that came from. Okay, again, this is not etymology, but what we do see is you have 3 instances of the same exact letters, the same exact word, albeit with different nekudos, each with different meaning. Okay, so as you know, when we embark on this intertextual study, we say that maybe these are clues, these are hints, and we've done this before, by the way, where we've compared Moshe to Noach. Okay, so if anybody wants to take a stab at why we compared the two, or maybe something that we mentioned in the past, before we go further, have at it right now. But it doesn't get you out of next week's assignment.
I
Anyone?
look at them as lonely characters, each of them. Very lonely.
Lonely. Why lonely? Noach, he had all those animals. He had.
Oh, I
Yeah,
think
but
they're,
go ahead, Shelley. Sorry.
they're very different. That Moshe fought for the people, and Noach was like, "Okay, we'll go into this, teva," and that's it.
How
Okay.
about the fact that they got the world on their shoulders?
Okay.
Right, but in each case, Moshe was reluctant.
So was
Okay.
Noah, though.
Well, Noah was reluctant, didn't do anything. I mean,
Moshe.
Right.
but in each case, Moshe started that way and only later became active.
Right. Right. Good. So this is good stuff. So we you guys are, you don't really need me anymore. So this is humble. This is pleasing and humbling at the same time. Okay. Look at source 4 and 5. When Hashem says to Moshe, again, in our famous chapter 32, and he says, the people are down there making the calf with Aaron. And like, meanwhile, back at the farm, again, that chapter takes place in 4 scenes. There's the people with Aaron making the calf. There's Moshe on the mountain with God. There's Moshe coming down to the people. And the 4th scene is Moshe going back to God. All in one chapter, pretty involved chapter. So when Hashem says to him, and this is in scene 2, Hashem says to Moshe, remember we talked last week about, he says, oh yeah, your children that you brought out of Egypt, Hashem disowned them. But he said the word is ki shiches amacha. Shiches. Miraculously, it's bolded here in my text. I don't know how that happens, but look at the next pasuk. Is where the word shiches automatically brings to mind. The word shiches is corruption. Vayar Elokim es haaretz v'hinei nishchasa ki hishchis kol basaras darkol haaretz. In the time of Noach, God destroyed. He wanted to destroy the world. Why? Because he saw how corrupt the earth was. The same exact word, shiches, corruption. So we have 2 instances where the corruption of a certain people leads God to come to the conclusion that they're not worthy of living, and he wants to destroy them all. And what does he do, though? He picks one individual to remain behind, meaning to be the one who is saved. So Hashem says to Noach, I'm getting rid of everyone, but I'm keeping you. He says to Moshe, I'm getting rid of everyone, but I'm keeping you. Why? Because of the word hishchit, because they are so corrupt. This is number 2, okay? We could take this, and by the way, there are a lot of comparisons, but just sharing a couple of them with you. Source number 6, this is one of our favorite ones, is that when Moshe was born, they couldn't hide him anymore. Of course, there's a decree against the children. And what happens? Where do they put him? I mean, this is in Yana Diyoma. It's coming up at the Seder. I hope people do this at the Seder. They tell the kids and tell the story, right? What did Moshe's mother put him in?
An ark.
Right. And nobody ever says an ark. They put him in a basket. But the Hebrew word is Vatikach lo tevat gomer. A teva. There are only 2 times that the word teva is used in this sense, and that's Moshe and of course with Noach. Okay, so you have Hashem wants to destroy the whole population and save one of them. Hashem, the word is hishchis because of corruption. Hashem, the word teva. They were both sort of shielded from the outside corruption or the outside destruction that surrounded them by this enclosure, which is a teva. Okay, the next one is actually very, very cute. So we know that we saw in the earlier pasuk that Noach waited a bunch of days, and then he sent out the birds, right? Okay, what did he send out? He sent out a like a raven, a dove, okay, a bunch of birds. So you'll say, okay, where does that have to do with Moshe? So this is actually very cute. If you look at source 7, Vayikach Yisrael Chosein Moshe est Tzipora Eshes Moshe Achar Shilucheha.
That's a rare.
It's actually funny. It's just funny, but it's a cute play on the words. Is at the beginning of Parashas Yisro, when Moshe Yisro takes Tzipora, the wife of Moshe, after he sent her away, meaning Moshe went down to Egypt, but he sent her away. He sent her out. But by the way, what's her name? Her name is Tzipora. Tzipora, of course, is a bird. Again, that's being very unbelievably cute. Okay, but you can't help but smile when you see something like oh yeah, it's like if they had to like add to now if this were the only thing that they had in common, I would say okay, you're gonna have to develop this a little bit more. But this is not the only. This is like the bottom of the list. Not only that, let's say in here, how long was Moshe on the mountain? Vahishamim Hashem arbaim yom v'arbaim laila. He's on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. So, of course, we know how long the flood was, 40 days and 40 nights. Now, so what do we do with this? So what's really happening here, and how? So, in other words, what the verses are telling us, what the words of the Torah are telling us, is pay attention to these 2 stories, put them side by side, as it were. Compare, contrast, learn, develop. What is it that we come up with this? Okay, so here's where it gets interesting, and this is like a typical like Rabbi Foreman kind of like Zetzi right in the Ki-Tisa with it. In source number 9. Okay, so we said last week when Hashem said to Moshe, "Vata hanichli," like leave, don't bother me anymore, which we learned that doesn't mean that he should leave me alone. It meant you have the ability to bother me, but just don't. In other words, your words can have an effect, but just leave me alone. Hanichali, which is Moshe Rabbeinu's key to say, okay, I'm not going to leave you alone. That's when he says, lama yecharei b'chal, right? This is right before a pasuk of Vayichal. He doesn't say anything when God accuses them. He doesn't say anything when God presses the verdict against them. And he doesn't say anything when God says they're stubborn. But then he says, but now leave me alone. I'm going to wipe them out. So what is this hanichali? What exactly is hanichali saying? So, if you look, I notice that here it's in red. Okay, so now look very carefully at the word and tell me if anything jumps out.
Noach.
Thank you. Exactly. The center of the word is Noach. It's as if he's saying to Moshe, it's a double entendre. He's saying, like, leave me alone, like, don't bother me, because I know your words can have an effect. But he's like, why can't you just be like Noach? Like, just Noach it. Be like Noach, because what did Noach do? Like we said correctly earlier,
He let God destroy the world.
He didn't
Right.
know. He
he
didn't
did
know.
nothing. Moshe, I'm sorry, Hashem says to Noach, the whole world is corrupt. I'm going to destroy them. And you have 120 years or whatever, however long it was, okay? And meanwhile, Noach, he built this boat. He went shopping, went to the ball game, he went to shul, Noach Kiddush, you know what I'm saying? And then when the time came, like, did he ever fight with God? And he said, God, don't do it. God, what if they don't mean it? God, what are the people going to say? God, what about the people who created the world? Nothing. So Hashem's saying, like, you ever have sometimes when you're angry and you don't want somebody to cheer you up because you just want to be angry for a while? Okay, not that we should be angry, but sometimes it's good to be angry, or sometimes when you have whatever emotion it might be that you're going through, you know, maybe fixing it isn't the right method at that moment. Sometimes you got to have like somebody like let it out, like, or you have a kid who's throwing a tantrum, like you don't want to like start patting the kid, like let him get it out of the system. I have a bunch of teenage daughters. It seems like that we're always getting stuff out of our system, and you think that Oprah interview was tough? Man, you should spend an evening in my house, okay? Can I digress for a second? Why does anybody care about that? Why is that such a big deal? Who cares? They're not real to me at all. Like, why? How does that get 2 hours of airtime? But like a teacher makes $12,000 a year, and that's like not important. Okay, anyway, you know me, I'm so progressive. The Noach does nothing. He says to Moshe, Hashem says to Moshe, he's like, Moshe, let me get this out of my system. Don't Noach me. Meaning like, don't Hanichali, leave me alone. Don't be like Noach. Hanichali, be like Noach to me. The only problem is that Moshe didn't listen. And this is why we know Moshe to be Moshe Rabbeinu. This is Moshe's expertise. Moshe saw an opportunity here, and he couldn't possibly resist the opportunity to stand up for another person. Remember how his career got developed. In the very beginning of Shmos, in the 2nd chapter after he's born, and we learn of 3 incidents right away that leads to sort of him being banished. And part of while he's being banished, one of the episodes is he sees an Egyptian taskmaster beating a Jew, and he does something about it. He sees 2 Jews fighting, and he does something about it. He sees the shepherds torturing the daughters of Yisro, and he does something about it. And then he like kind of tries to escape himself, but it's not until later on that he's forced to come back into the business, in the family business of God, right? So Moshe's whole persona, and if you look at his whole career, and as we said last time, this is his crowning moment. This is the shining moment for Moshe Rabbeinu right now, because this defines his career. This is the first time that the Jews are really in trouble. I mean, they complained, but that's understandable. They didn't have water. They were at Mara. They didn't have food. They complained. I get that. But here, this is the first time where God says, I'm going to kill them. Now, Moshe could have just said, yeah, God, you're right. Like, I don't know. And even though Moshe later on, he says to God, like, why do we have this job for? Take me out of your book. I don't want to have any part of this. These people are terrible. What am I supposed to be, like a mother who's nursing them? Like, on and on and on and on and on. But yet he always goes to bat for the Jewish people. And here he has an opportunity where he could be silent with impunity. And he could say, no, like, no, what am I supposed to do? God decided. But no, he steps up and he acts. Here's where it gets really interesting also. Because when he finally does act and he says to God, Vayichal, and he entreats God and he says, Lema, like to what end? What do you have to gain by getting rid of them? And then what happens is the pasuk there says in source 10, Vayinachem Hashem al hara'ah asher diber la'asos le'amal. And Hashem here it says renounced. I'm going to look at what does it say in the Holy Art Scroll. In the Art Scroll it says Hashem reconsidered. I like that better. Hashem reconsidered. Vayinachem Hashem al hara'ah asher diber la'asos le'amal. And Hashem changed his mind from the evil that he wanted to do to his people. What evil was that? That he wanted to wipe them out. Now, it doesn't mean that he forgave them, because God still has not forgiven us for this, as we discussed last week. Any sin that we do, God is always reminded of the golden calf. But he didn't wipe us out in a second, which is good. The same thing, by the way, when Moshe pleads on behalf of the spies, the sin of the spies, God also changes his mind. He wants to wipe them out. But there he just says, I'm not going to kill them all right now. I'll kill them gradually over 40 years. Or the remaining 38 and a half years. Okay, so here, Vayinachem al hara'ah, God changed his mind. Now, what's interesting is this again brings us back to the Noach story. If you look at the Noach story, what brought about the God's decision to destroy the world? So look at this pasuk. It's at the end of Bereshis, source number 11. Vayar Hashem ki rabba ra'as ha'adam ba'aretz v'chol yetzer machshavos libo rak kol hayom. Vayinachem Hashem ki asa es ha'adam ba'aretz vayis atzev el libo. We've looked at this pasuk in the past. We've discussed it in the past. We've agonized over it in the past. But here it is again. By the way, look at the 3 distinct similarities, comparisons between these two psukim, which are clearly bolded. Okay. Hashem saw how evil the wickedness of man was on earth, and that everything in his mind was always evil all day long. So God, vayinachem, he changed his mind, or he regretted Ki-Tisa es ha'adam ba'aretz, that he created man. Vayisatzev elibo. Man, we talk about how God being sad, like this personification of God being sad. But look at the three words. In the first pasuk, vayinachem hara'a la'asos. Vayinachem, he changed his mind, hara'a, because of evil that he wanted to do. Hashem, now here, he saw ra'ah, the evil. He made them vayinachem. So here, the first time we see vayinachem, God is using that vayinachem to change his mind in order to destroy them. Here, vayinachem, Hashem is changing in his mind in order to not destroy them. It's almost as if this is like closing a circle, or it's coming full circle, that Moshe Rabbeinu somehow, and you might even call it, maybe he's the repair, maybe he's the tikkun of Noach. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who is able to fix that which Noach couldn't do. Okay, so I'll just give you a side point, by the way, and it's something it's always worth repeating, and I share with a lot of people, especially when people are getting up from Shiva. I heard this from one of my Rebbeim, from Rabbi J.J. Schachter, who heard it from Rabbi Leo Young. Rabbi Leo Young was like a rabbi's rabbi. He was the rabbi of the Jewish Center for over 60 years, okay, on the west side. And he said that when he used to take people up from Shiva, he would say, the whole Shiva, people are saying to you, and there are different ways that people do it. I like the way they say it in Israel. They say min hashamayim tinuchamo. I think it's a beautiful way of putting it. In the UK, they say may you live a very long life. Things like that. So when we say usually hamakom yinachem, by the way, this is a good opportunity if anybody is still looking for material for next week's assignment. The hamakom that we say in Haggadah, Baruch hamakom, Baruch Hu, we refer to God as hamakom there, and we refer to hamakom, God, as hamakom when we give benediction to consolation to mourners. Why the similarity? Just throwing it out there in case somebody wants to grab hold of that, helping you out. But we say hamakom yinachem, that God should give you comfort. Nechama is comfort. If usually you have someone who's born around Tisha B'Av, they have the name Nachum, Menachem, Nechama, Nechemka, right? Nechama means you should have Nechama. You should have Nechama. So, but how is it related to this? So the first time that the word Nechama appears in the Torah is right here. Vayinachem Hashem Ki-Tisa es ha'adam. Hashem changed his mind. So how does that relate to Nechama? So Rabbi Young used to say was that, you know what, right now you're in pain and you're thinking of loss, and often loss is followed, let's say, by months of agony, of illness, of hospital visits and hospital stays, and and if you've ever had to do like the death vigil in a hospital back when you could be in the hospital, with the stuff plugged in and the beeping, and you're like getting the nurse every 10 seconds because the thing won't stop beeping and all. We've all been through that, right? So he says, when does the real nechama happen? When is the comfort? When the image of your loved one is changed in your mind from those last moments to a person's vitality, to a person's vibrancy. When you think back of your loved one, and you think of him or her in, you hear the voice and like stark, when you hear them healthy and really full of life, that's when the comfort comes. And it may take a lot of time. A lot of people can't get past the mourning stage. It's not healthy, by the way. It's not healthy for someone to 3, 4, 5 years later to still be thinking of their loved one as if it was yesterday. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying, but at a certain point, you have to like recognize and say, maybe we need to get some help. But that's why the God gives us the gift of time. The Gemara says that time helps us deal with our wounds, and they'll never go away. But it just we find better coping mechanisms. We find ways to deal with that. I mentioned this. I don't know when I did, but I'll share with you like something that my brother told me. We're navigating this together as a family, and it's weird. I got to tell you, it's like really weird having taken so many people through it before, but now going through it myself. And one of the things that my siblings and I, we ask each other, like, you know, like, do you cry a lot? My kids always ask me if I cry. They want to ask me if I cry. I'll tell you one time that I cry always. I'm a sucker that if you put in front of me a video of one of those like military families when they surprise them coming home after like being abroad I can't not watch it. Okay. And I cry like a baby when I see it every time. You know, it doesn't matter who it is coming in. Like they came back from Afghanistan after 2 years, surprised them at a game, in a costume, whatever. Okay. But my kids are like, when do you cry? Like, and you know, like, I don't know if you remember when you saw it the first time that you saw your parents cry. Because you think of your parents as sort of like superhuman and like they can handle anything, and then you see them crying and you're like, whoa, I never saw that side of them. So my siblings was like, do we cry? I said, you know, I really don't cry a lot. And my brother told me, he said, you know, he had an insight that when you can look back at your loved one and say that, you know, we said everything that needed to be said, and we did everything that needed to be done, and we lived our lives to the fullest, and he lived his life to the fullest. And, you know, there's no regrets. There's no sense of loss, of longing, of I should have, would have, could have. Maybe that's why. That could be one possibility. Look, there's a sadness, and there's always going to be triggers. You know, I'm sure Pesach is going to be a big trigger. My father's birthday was always on Pesach. Most years in April, but this year it's going to be actually before. My mom's going to be with us, so you know, like all these things, and you never know. It's a song, it's a food, it's a book. Who knows what it could be, and that can happen. But at a certain point, Vayinachem, you know, you don't think of yourself constantly in the stage of loss, but you think of yourself in the stage of post-loss, like that. So that's what Rabbi Young. But that's this Vayinachem. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu. He actually takes God's initial commitment to change his mind from creation. And what does he do? He turns it into a changing of mind from destruction and allowing them to live. And maybe that's also the same thing of Vayichal and Vayachel. Vayichal, Moshe turned the Vayichal of Noach, who just kind of like went along. Now, again, it's very hard we love to like pick on Noach. You know, everybody picks on Noach because he was Ish Tzaddik at first, and then after all, at the end, he becomes, as we saw in this pasuk, he's Isha Adama, and then he gets off the thing and he gets drunk. Oh, you know, Noach, he's not. If he was with Avraham, oh, he would have done nothing. No, he wouldn't have been a tzaddik at all. Okay, but at the end of the day, Noach is called a tzaddik, and God did pick Noach when the entire world was corrupt. The entire world was corrupt, and God picked Noach. So that's got to be worth something. And by the way, if you were locked up, and I think we could probably relate to this a little bit, for 40 days and 40 nights with your family and a bunch of animals, and you couldn't go anywhere because it was a tempest outside, and maybe your family are the animals, I don't know, but if you were locked up for that long, who wouldn't want to have a drink? Right? Like who, like, so we have to, like, you know, let's give it a broader picture here. Now, Noach
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Isn't it when we judge Noach, we judge Moshe, don't we have to judge them in context of the people that they were either positioning Hashem for or not? So the Jewish people had just exited slavery. They were not considered at a high level of greatness. They were very, very low. And so maybe Moshe's pleas were heard because of the positions of the people, and you couldn't expect that much from them where they were. But the people of Noach's time were not suffering from slavery. And maybe no matter what Noach would have done, it wouldn't have mattered because the people were at a different level and Hashem wasn't going to be convinced. So can we judge them in a vacuum?
We have no way to know that. I mean, that would be a great experiment. Like if Moshe was alive in Noach's time, would he have been able to do anything?
Well, we know
Right.
they didn't come out of slavery and that they were free. So in theory, they didn't suffer from hundreds of years of slavery and abuse and not having access to religion. They had more freedom, clearly.
Okay, so but if that's the case, then why does God come to the same conclusion in each case, each time?
Well,
In
he
other
came to the same conclusion initially, but he was able to be convinced
I was
through
playing a
Moshe.
game, like, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. It's I mean, it's a great what if game. We like to play a lot of what if, you know. what if, and by that I think that's probably what the first Rashi in Noach is exactly debating. That it said Noach was a tzaddik. He was a tzaddik in his generation, but he wouldn't have been a tzaddik in Avram's generation. It's kind of like the reverse of that. Is that Noach? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know if.
I want to just add, God also had an agreement with Moshe and Israel, which didn't exist yet in the time of Noach.
Correct. But he said, look, God found a way around it. He's like, all right, Moshe, I got you. I'll rebuild through you. That's just like I did with Abraham, same phrase. I start with one guy. I can start with one guy again. God's like, no problem. I got you. All I need is one guy. It's interesting. It's hard. It's hard to know, but I think that we're not so much trying to compare and say Moshe versus Noach. We're just saying sort of like Moshe vis-a-vis Noach. Like Moshe's put in the same Noach type of situation, and God's like, can't you just shut your mouth and be like Noach and just let me destroy the people, right? Come on, Moshe, right? Moshe's like, yeah, nah, can't let that go. So it teaches us really about Moshe. And again, this, if you look at his career and all the books that have been written about Moshe, and there are many, many, many great books. Again, I would recommend if you want a good study this summer, I just pulled off the shelf. So this is my favorite one. Okay, this is Rabbi Tzvi Grummet, who was he was a great teacher here in TABC, and before he made Aliyah, he teaches in many of the yeshivas, the boys' yeshivas in Israel. He also wrote a book on Bereshis with Koren. This is a book called Moshe and the Path to Leadership, Moses and the Path to Leadership. This is my favorite one. This is phenomenal. You have the ones that are in these, this series that's done by the Yale Press series. They did on different people in the Bible, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yehuda, and also it's like, Herzl and Begin and Ben Gurion, etc. This is on Moses. This is Aviva Zornberg. So if you've read her books on Tanakh, I mean, you need to like really sink your teeth in. It's not like bedside reading. Really good. Then you have Moshe Lichtenstein. Moshe Lichtenstein wrote this book. He's Rav Aaron Lichtenstein's son, Rav Moshe Lichtenstein, one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Gush. This book on Moshe Rabbeinu. Plus, if you read Erica Brown's book on Bamidbar, which is leadership in the wilderness, that also gives you a great idea. But if you take this lens, and then you look at Moshe Rabbeinu's career through this lens. And by the way, so how is Moshe Rabbeinu defined ultimately in the Torah? He's the only person that gets an epitaph, right? And what do they say to him? What's he called? He's called, it's 2 words, simple words.
Rabbeinu.
No, he's never called Rabbeinu in the Torah.
Oh.
He's called Eved Hashem. It's the very end of the Chumash. Moshe died there. Vayamas Hashem, Vayam Hashem, Moshe Eved Hashem. By the way, I'd sign up for that. That's a pretty good. Can you imagine somebody had like the chutzpah to write that on a gravestone, like in a Eved Hashem? Rabbi Lookstein once taught us. I was giving a session to rabbis, and he said, "Rabbis, he says, you're not an Eved Hashem. He says you're an Eved La'ovdei Hashem." Very smart. Think about it. So the Eved Hashem means that he served God, but sometimes serving God doesn't mean just doing what God says, but sometimes it's doing the right thing despite what God says and throwing it in God's face. That's what makes him great. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu is so filled with chutzpah. He's such audacity, the way he speaks to God of saying like, take me out of your book. And that's later on in that chapter 32. I don't want to be, why do I need this job? Who needs it? God, get rid of me. I don't want to see it. Who speaks like that to God? You're like Moshe was like the original millennial, right? It's good. So Miriam got off the call, so I could say that, right? One thing I'll never understand is millennials, but okay, that's a conversation for another time when we're not being recorded. Miriam is wonderful, by the way. What she does with the kids in NCSY is absolutely incredible. I mean, especially now having to work kind of remotely, she's absolutely incredible. The audacity, the chutzpah with which Moshe Rabbeinu carries himself, and there's a very fine line, but he's still called Eved Hashem, and that's why God relents when God says, "It's just like Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't resist that when somebody's in need, he has to help out. It's almost like God couldn't resist. When Moshe Rabbeinu pleads and he pleads and he begs, Hashem has to give in. Hashem has to let him. And that's why in Parshas Va'eschanan, when it says, God says to him, what does God say to him? I'll read you the exact passage later on. It's amazing. And it's a summer parsha. It's like right after Tisha B'Av. It's almost summer, okay? Ve'yisaber Hashem bi lema'anchem v'lo shama elai, v'yomer Hashem elai ravloch al tosef daber elai od ba'davar hazeh. He said, Hashem was angry. He didn't listen to me. He said, it's too much for you. Stop talking to me about this. And the way the Mefarshim read this, many of the Mefarshim are, Moshe's asking, why can't I go to Israel? It's one of the greatest injustices in the history of the Torah. Why can't Moshe go into Israel? Let him go as a citizen. Let him go as a regular guy. Let him, for whatever the reason is, which we may or may not understand. But why can't Moshe go into Israel? So what happens is Hashem says to him, he says, Moshe, stop talking. Stop talking about this matter. And the way the Mefarshim explained it is because if you keep asking, I'm going to have no choice but to relent and to give in and give you what you want. We know this also. Children, grandchildren, right? Asking. At a certain point, we're just so like, shepherd, like, leave me, okay, just take it away, like, leave me alone. They wear us down. And you know that especially with young children, it's a battle of wits. Like, who's stronger? Okay. When we had the babies, like, I could let them scream for hours, no problem. The moms, oh, it's so hard. Like, they're like, maybe something's wrong with them. Maybe this, I'm like, they're fine. Just let them scream. Like, you know, they have to go to sleep. Let them scream. 2 hours, no problem. Like, if I'm watching the kids, my wife comes home, how with them? I'm like, perfect. Like, make a peep. I don't know. Shut the monitor off. Right. So I don't know. That's one way. That's one approach. But this is so putting this all together, the whole chapter 32, and then you take it together with the Noach story and you look at the similarities again, because the Torah is like throwing you these clues saying, look at Noach, look at the comparison of the two stories. Whereas one story started where God changed his mind from creation to now destruction. It ends with God changing his mind from destruction now to creation. And the two similar individuals, 40 days in the teva, sending the birds away, et cetera, and so many more similarities. But these are the two individuals that God chose to save when he wanted to destroy everything around them. Moshe Rabbeinu does not sit idly by, even though God says, Hanichali, Moshe, be like Noach. Moshe says, no, I can't leave it alone. I cannot stand when there's injustice. I cannot stand when there's something that I can do. And that's the lesson that we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. So that is the part 2 of this. Again, it's too much for one session, but I'm sure nobody minds doing this instead of Vayakal Pekude, which is unbelievably not exciting. But it's a double parsha this week and Parsha HaChodesh. And then God willing, next week, please, I'm going to ask you, please, everybody, try and do it. It's 1 minute, 2 minutes, and I'll have plenty to share as well. Come up with something on the Haggadah. If anybody needs help, please, I'm happy to help you. And, it's lots of great stuff that we could share, because when we share, we come from our different perspectives. I think it'll be very, very helpful. So I hope everybody has a great day. I hope you get outside. It's supposed to be nice today, I think, warm, right? So I could start sneezing. Gail, if you can hang on a second, I want to ask you something, if you don't mind. And everybody should have a great day.